Today, I'm going to be teaching you some secrets on mastering your key signatures. So by the end of this lesson, you're going to be able to figure out how many sharps or flats a certain key has. Like say you have the key of E, I'll know that that has 4 sharps. So that's what you'll be able to do. But also you'll be able to reverse engineer that where I'll be giving you like a certain number of sharps or flats, and then you're going to be able to figure out what key you are in from there. Let's get to it. Okay, there's 2 things you absolutely must do before we begin. That is memorize your order of sharps and memorize your order of flats. And I'm going to tell you why here in a second, but your order of sharps is F, C, G, D, A, E, B. There's 7 of them. F, C, G, D, A, E, B. Say that over and over. You can come up with a saying, if the kind of like when you learn how to read music, if you want. I know that a young student of mine said the saying for her was, "Fat children gather daily at every breakfast." F, C, G, D, A, E, and B. Order of flats you got to memorize. It's actually sharps in reverse. So it's B, E, A, D, G, C, F. B, E, A, D, G, C, F. And the way I tell my students to memorize this one is it spells bead, so that's pretty good. And then greatest common factor, GCF. So bead, greatest common factor. So what are the sharps again? F, C, G, D, A, E, B. Order flats, B, E, A, D, G, C, F. These are literally the order in which you add the sharps or the flats to the key signature, and you'll understand more in a second. Okay, so in the beginning of pretty much every piece you will play, you're going to find what is called a key signature, which is this guy and this guy. And what they tell you is the number of sharps and what those sharps are, or flats rather. They can be sharps or flats. Basically what sharps or flats are going to appear consistently throughout that piece. So the 3 sharps we have here are F, C, and G. That means all Fs, all Cs, all Gs in the whole piece, unless it tells you otherwise with a natural, are going to be sharp. Same thing with the left hand. So does that look familiar? F, C, G. Gee, that should look like something we talked about a second ago. The order of sharps, right? F, C, G. So when you have 3 sharps, F, C, and G, those are the 3 sharps you have. Pretty easy, right? Now if I had 5 sharps, I'd have F, C, G, D, and A. Let's see if that checks out. Okay, I said our 5 sharps are F, C, G, D, and A. So if you had a note right where that first sharp is, you'd obviously have F. Like I said, the first 3 are F, C, G. And then, hey, if I had a note here on this line, that would be D, and down there would be A. And again, the bass clef, it's the exact same notes. It's just they appear in a different place because the notes are shifted with the bass clef. That's just how it is. Okay, so F, C, G, D, A. It marks out perfectly. Okay, flats works the exact same way. You got 4 flats here, except this time you're going to be using your order of flats. Remember, the first 4 in your order of flats spell bead. So I'm willing to bet that this first flat is B, E, next one's E, A, and D. Hey, that spells bead, and it matches up perfectly. You just got to take my word for it. As you have more and more sharps, or more and more flats and more sharps, it matches out to be the same thing up to 7. Now, one thing that confuses people is there's a big difference between the amount of sharps or flats a piece can have, a key signature can have, and the actual name of the key. They don't always line up. In fact, they often do not. Let's take a look here. So we have our 4 flats, B, E, A, and D. I said right a second ago that spells bead. Our first 4 in our order of flats. Now, the second part of the question is, well, what key is this in? Like, if you're in a band, you'd have to know, like, all right, guys, we're going to play this in the key of D or the key of F sharp or something like that. So you need to know what the heck that's about. So for the flats, it's really easy. And all you got to do is you find the flat all the way to the right. And you're going to ignore it. So you're going to go to the one right next to that. One in, I guess you could say one in from the right is probably a better way to put it. And you're going to find, so if you had a note here, and it's the 3rd letter in bead, right? So that's A. So what you're going to do is you're going to find A on the piano. Any A will do. Here's A, and then you flat it, just like that. So the key with 4 flats, B, E, A, and D, is actually the key of A flat. Let's do a couple more examples. All right, what about this one? We got 6 flats now, and all you got to do is say the first 6 in your order of flats, B, E, A, D, G, and C. And what you do is you ignore the last flat. You go 1 in from the right, and that's actually your answer. So what note would that be? Well, if it's on the second line of the treble clef, it's G. So you go to your piano, you find G, and you flat it. G flat. And that works out for all of them except for one. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Because I said up until now, with the flats, to figure out what key you're in, you go 1 in from the right. Well, what if there's only 1 flat? Then you can't go 1 in from the right, and then you're kind of up a creek, I guess they could say. Try to be family friendly as I can on this channel. But it's the key of F. You're just going to have to memorize that one because there's no flat. You know, I'll show you what the key of F looks like right now. There's only 1 flat on the whole thing. And yeah, you're just going to have to memorize it because of obvious reasons. So let's just, real quick, I just want to show you what that looks like. So it looks like that. And then one thing I haven't showed you at all before we move on to the sharps portion is if you have nothing written at all, you're probably talking about the key of C major. It's a possibility that some of these are minor keys as well. We're not going to go too much into that. I will mention it here at the end, though. Okay, now what do you do with sharps? It works a little bit different. This is, you have the key signature in front of you already. You have the 2 sharps, which are what? F and C, right? So the second one is C. So what you do this time, you are going to the one all the way at the end. And what you're going to do is you're going to find that note on the piano and sharp it. So it would be C sharp, right? So our 2 notes are F sharp, C sharp. You find that sharp and you go up a half step. You got to make sure that you count this right. It's just the next note connecting it. So the key, the name of the key that we're in is the key of D. And the 2 sharps we have are F sharp and C sharp. Let's do a couple more sharp examples. Okay, now we have a lot of sharps. We have 6 sharps, and nobody likes to play with 6 sharps. So what sharps do we have? Well, we have these 6 sharps, F, C, G, D, A, and E. Now, where did I get those 6 from? From your order of sharps. You got to do that first. Memorize those. It will help with everything else for obvious reasons. Now, I'm going to leave this up to you, sort of. What do we do next? Think about it. Do we go to the one in from the right? Well, no, because that's what we did for the flats. You got to keep in mind it's a little bit different. But this time we are actually looking at the one all the way to the right. And if I had a note there in that top space, that would be E, right? And we're talking about E sharp, since we're talking about sharps. So to keep in mind that E sharp is here. This is where you're starting from. And this is why I said you have to be careful of moving up only a half step or you're not going to get the right answer. So what you do is you move from E sharp, which looks a whole lot like F, doesn't it? You bring it up a half step, and therefore the key that we are in is F sharp. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, if you are big brained, you may be, or just, curious, you might be thinking, okay, well, Tim, why isn't that the key of G flat? Because it could be, right? They're the same note. F sharp is the same as G flat. Well, here's the thing, is that if you are talking about a key with sharps in it, your resulting key signature is going to be sharp. If you're talking about keys with flats in them, your resulting key signature is going to be what? No, flat. It's going to be flat. So it always matches whatever you're talking about. Sharps with sharps, flats with flats. All right, well, what if you're in a band and somebody says play in the key of F, play in the key of G, play in the key of D, and you don't have the sharps or flats in front of you? What in the world do you do? Well, your old friends, the order sharps and order flats, are here to help you out, if that wasn't corny enough. So here we go. So here's how it works for sharps. So say that we have a sharp key. By the way, all sharp keys, except for the last 2, don't have sharp after them. So, G, D, A, E, and B all don't have sharp after them. However, all the flat ones do have flats after them. So like B flat, A flat, things like that. Just want to throw that out there. So say we have the key of E, right? So all you got to do is play E on the piano, and there's a little bit more to it. You go down 1 whole step, And you are going to then figure out what note that is, which is D, right? We started from E. Now we have D. Now here's probably the second part of how you're going to get this. What you need to do now is count to your order of sharps until you get to D sharp. So here we go. F, which is 1. C, which is 2. G, and then D is 4. So we figured it out. The key of E has 4 sharps, F, C, G, and D. Let's do a few more. Let's say your bandmate says play in the key of D. All right, well, how many sharps or flats do we have? Well, since it's D and doesn't have flat after, you can surmise that we're probably talking about sharps. So you find D, then what do? You go down a whole step to C. So now what we got to do is we got to count our order sharps until we get to C. F, which is 1, C, 2. So we already got to our answer. The key of D has 2 sharps, F sharp and C sharp. By the way, learning your scales, little tidbit in here, is a great way to really memorize and internalize each of these key signatures. All right, one more sharp key to go. What if somebody says, let's play in the key of F sharp, and you're like, darn you, nobody likes F sharp. And you can probably guess that it has a lot of sharps. Well, let's figure it out, right? So here you go. You're going to start on F sharp. That's the key of the name of the key that we're in. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go down 2 half steps or a whole step. So E. So now what's the next step? You count your order of sharps until you get to E. Here we go. F, C, G, D, A, E. So 6 sharps. And the 6 sharps it has are the F, C, G, D, A, and E, the first 6 in your order sharps. Let's talk about some flats. You got to be careful because flats works a little bit different. Let me show you. So let's say somebody says play in the key of B flat. So let's check that out. So here's B flat. So now we got to figure out how many flats in the key of B flat. So here's what you do. Once you hit the note that you're starting with, you don't have to count down or up now. With flats, it's a little bit different. You just play that note. And then what you got to do, then you go to counting your order of flats. Similar to the sharps, one less step. And then what you do is you get to the flat that you're talking about. So in your order of flats, B, right? Well, I'm already hitting B. But here's the thing. With flats, you go one more, E. So the key of B flat actually has 2 flats, B flat and E flat. So you find the flat you're looking for, and then you actually go one more in your order of flats. Let's do, like, say, the key of A flat, right? So here's A flat. We don't need to do anything on the keyboard. And then what you do is you count your flats until you get to A flat, B, E, A. Oh, there you go. So there's 3. But then you add 1. You have to add 1, D. So the key of A flat is 4 flats, B, E, A, and D. One more with the flats. Let's say we have C flat. So C flat looks a lot like B on the piano, but it's different. So here, we're talking about flats, so you don't need to move anywhere. Now what do? Well, you count your order of flats until you get to not B. You got to keep in mind that this is C flat. So here we go. B, E, A, D, G, C, right? So we found it. But we have to add 1 more, right? So you always add 1. F. So the key of C flat actually has all 7 flats. That's the maximum you can have. And it's B, E, A, D, G, C, and F. Okay, I want to tell you about something that is going to come into play a little bit more later on as you get better and better at these. I didn't want to bring this into play so much right now because I want to avoid confusion. So pay attention, like, mostly to the stuff I've talked up until now, but you do need to know about this because you might see some discrepancies in, you know, the pieces that you play and things like that. So for every key signature, so far we've been talking all about major keys, and major keys sound, you know, bright and happy. So if we had a key with 1 sharp, G, has a bright and happy sound. However, for every key signature, there's a major and minor equivalent, and you need to know basically how to figure this out. So let's take, for example, the key with 0 sharp, 0 flats. I mentioned way earlier that is the key of C. I just played the C major chord with the C major scale up there, right? 0 sharp, 0 flats. However, there is another. There is that's a meme. So if there's another key signature with 0 sharp, 0 flats, and you do this. This is how you figure it out. You go to your major key, C, and then you go down 1, 2, 3 half steps, and that gives you your answer. So the key of A minor also has 0 sharp, 0 flats, except the only difference is you're starting on A, really, and you're going to have different chords with it that center more around A. Now, if you're playing a piece, how are you going to tell whether it's major or minor? Well, the main thing, there's actually quite a few steps to this, but the main thing I want you to do is use your ears. So if I'm playing a piece, right, does that sound happy? Well, yeah, certainly does. Much more than, yeah, that sounds really sad. So if it sounds happy, you're talking about major keys, which means everything I talked about in this lesson is valid and good. And then if it sounds minor, I mean, everything I said is still valid and good, but just keep in mind that if the piece sounds minor, then you're going to have to go down those 3 half steps to figure that out. And that works for sharp key signatures and flat key signatures. If you don't understand what I'm saying at all to this point, don't worry about it. Work on the stuff I told you in the beginning of the lesson, because I like to be very objective with the lessons, like to get the student to really understand one thing and then get you to understand another. But it wouldn't be fair if I didn't mention the minors. Understanding your key signatures and music theory is super important if you want to become a better piano player. Check out this playlist right here. It will really help catch you up with these key signatures, give you extra practice, things like that. It's been your piano teacher, Tim, here. Thank you so much for coming by today. And I'll see you, yes you, in the next lesson.